Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another guest video.
Here
Today,
I am, let's go.
This is Rowan Ellis.
Hello.
Yay! So Rowan is an incredible YouTuber, author, podcaster, queer media critic.
And,
Yes.
But yes, I do all of those things. Professional homosexual is the title on my business card.
Oh, is it?
I wish I had those
well, it
business
should be
cards.
now. So when I was coming up with people that I wanted to collaborate with to guest host videos on this channel, Rowan was one of the first people that came to my mind. You may also be realizing that she has the same name as my son. Coincidence.
Complete coincidence. I didn't burst into the delivery room listen up. I got some doubt on you and I know what your son's name is going to be.
I did text you before I announced his birth to the wider world, just being like, hey Rowan, FYI.
I felt very special.
I've had my baby. His name is Rowan.
Just a warning.
Exactly. But Rowan has an incredible YouTube channel. I've learned so much from it. She talks all about queer media and just critiques it and celebrates it. And also your unhinged lesbian rants are some of my favorite things that I've ever seen. If you do an unhinged lesbian rant about a TV show or a film, that then suddenly jumps up in my to watch list.
To watch, if it's made Rowan go slightly feral, there's got to be something in it.
Yeah, I'll be like, okay, I need to save this to watch later and I need to go watch this thing and then come back and watch the video. But basically, now that I have a child, I am now a parent, one of the things that has been on my mind is about kids media and especially queer kids media. What is out there? What's the history of it? What's some of the boo-boo bad homophobic things going on? And Rowan, in my personal opinion, is one of the best people placed to take us on that journey.
Take you on the trip.
Yeah, so take it away and I hope you enjoy. Please be nice. I know you will. And thank you so much, Rowan.
Thanks for having me. When Hannah and I were growing up, there was quite literally and deliberately no LGBTQ+ representation on our TV screens. Children's media was exclusively for heterosexuals, whether it was the children's parents, the schoolyard crush storylines, or any other characters in every show. So when baby Rowan was born, thinking about queer inclusive shows that I could recommend for him as he grows up pulled me up short. I didn't have a list of nostalgic childhood favourites that were even acknowledging my existence, let alone celebrating it. And because my ADHD-riddled brain is incapable of chilling out for 2 seconds, I started to deep dive into research about the history of LGBTQ+ children's TV, and this video is the result. Why it's important. Before we dig into the history, I want to talk about why this is a big deal, because there may well be people who are stumbling across this video who haven't really thought about this before, who have a kind of instinctual feeling of, isn't that a bit confusing for kids to hear about? Why do they have to be learning about this stuff now? Can't it wait till they're older? First, let's imagine a hypothetical child watching these shows that is LGBTQ+ themselves. Maybe they already know, or perhaps they'll figure it out when they are older. We know that giving them respectful and authentic representation can allow them to see a positive view of what life could be like for them, gives them role models, and leads them through fictionalized versions of experiences that they might have. And this is the kind of social support that they desperately need. A survey last year by the Trevor Project found that 42% of the nearly 35,000 LGBTQ youths who were surveyed, and over half of trans and non-binary youths that were surveyed, seriously considered suicide within the past 12 months. And research by William T. L. Cox at the University of Wisconsin-Madison shows that negative stereotyping and prejudice mindsets in media contributes significantly to bullying, harassment, depression, and suicide. Being LGBTQ+ in and of itself doesn't make you depressed or suicidal. It's your surroundings and your treatment that contributes to this at such a disproportionately high rate. Homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia have both an internal and an external effect on young people, on their mental and physical well-being, especially with no alternative viewpoints. And it's not just self-acceptance. This kind of representation is vital for straight and cis young people too, not just because it would help alleviate the ignorance that contributes to LGBTQ+ suffering, but because fundamentally, encouraging children to embrace difference and empathy will make them better people. Good representation can change cultural attitudes and sway the public more than even legal changes in many cases. Stories have long been a way for humans to make sense of the world around us, and one of the most powerful uses of this is connecting us to each other. After all, queer people exist. Showing them in children's media is simply reflecting reality. It might be introducing a child to the idea of people and families different to their own, but it might also just be reflecting the existing family of a child watching with two mums, for example. Queer people have always existed in reality, but why haven't we always been seen on screen? Let's take a trip back to the start of the 20th century and look at the Hays Code. In 1915, there was an American court case, very imaginatively named Mutual Film Corporation versus Industrial Commission of Ohio. Essentially, the judge concluded from this court case that censorship of movies fell under the power of the American government and were not protected under the First Amendment because there was the potential for them to be used for evil. Fearing that censorship might be forced on them, Hollywood came up with and enforced their own set of guidelines known as the Hays Code. This included a section that covered LGBTQ+ characters. The sympathy of the audience shall never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. And in an era where homosexuality was deemed as evil, a sin, even a crime, LGBTQ+ characters were censored. Mostly they were entirely absent, but if they were portrayed, the code insisted that you would need to have them be punished or live miserable, incomplete lives to prove that you were not endorsing their lifestyle. We can see how cinema, and in turn television, from this very start, was used to leaving queerness out of any kind of positive representation. This absence, in turn, encouraged the idea that such people were inappropriate to be seen as characters worthy of positive representation, and the cycle continued. The Hays Code came to an end over 50 years ago, but its legacy lives on. This year, in fact, we saw Pixar staff blow the whistle on internal censorship policies within the company, claiming that Disney corporate executives demanded cuts to nearly every moment of overtly gay affection, regardless of when there is protest from both the creative teams and executive leadership at Pixar. We at Pixar have personally witnessed beautiful stories full of diverse characters come back from Disney corporate reviews shaved down to crumbs of what they once were. Even if creating LGBTQIA+ content was the answer to fixing the discriminatory legislation in the world, we are being barred from creating it. And that wasn't the only policy or law that affected what was seen as appropriate for children. In the UK, LGBTQ+ education within schools and libraries was hidden from children for many years, due in part to something called Section 28. This was a clause in a local government act that was enacted by Margaret Thatcher's government in the 1980s, which prohibited the promotion of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. And back in the US, the 1970s evangelical Christian spokesperson Anita Bryant and the Save Our Children campaign preached that gay people were preying on and converting children. A campaign to prevent gay people from becoming teachers emerged. The leaflets and literature said, "There is a real danger that homosexual teachers, social workers, or counselors, simply by public acknowledgement of their lifestyles, can encourage sexual deviation in children." Early representation. This idea that any information given to children about LGBTQ+ people was inherently wrong or dangerous is one of the reasons that early representation was so revolutionary. Probably the earliest type of TV representation was documentary-style inclusions in factual or educational content. In 2002, an episode of Nick News' special edition called My Family is Different aired in the US, which discussed non-traditional families, specifically those with gay parents. In a 2005 episode of Postcards from Buster, the topic of equal marriage was very lightly touched upon, but was still enough to garner complaints from the United States Secretary of Education at the time herself. These shows were one-off, very special episodes which literally just portrayed a factual part of life, yet even going that far was controversial at the time. The only fictional portrayal from around that period that I could find was an episode of Braceface in the mid-2000s. This early example was remarkably progressive. It has the show's protagonist attempt to set up two of her friends, Dion and Houston, who are both gay men. The fact that they are clearly named after Celine Dion and Whitney Houston aside, the episode is a thinly veiled attempt to tackle the idea that just because a guy is gay, it doesn't mean that he's attracted to every guy he sees, and that you can't force people to like each other. The show never says the word gay, but it's pretty clear in the text and subtext that these two men aren't straight, and it's treated as completely normal that they might fancy each other. They, of course, don't kiss, that would be going a bit too far, but more recent examples of one-off side characters also exist, like those in Gravity Falls or Doc McStuffins. A more well-known and, dare I say, infamous example is that of Susan and Cheryl in a 2014 episode of Good Luck Charlie, who were the first same-sex parents depicted in a fictional children's TV show in the US. Their appearance on screen is part of a joke between the main parents in the show, and although they are just there for a brief scene, this was enough to garner a storm of complaints from the American public. It's been alleged but never proven that this backlash was a part of the decision to cancel the show altogether. This threat of cancellation inevitably led to writers and showrunners concealing LGBTQ+ characters from open representation, whether of their own volition or because they were forced to. Hidden representation. Perhaps the most famous example of this from the last few years is the case of Korra and Asami from The Legend of Korra. In the final episode of the show, the two women face each other holding hands as they basically walk off into the sunset together. For older viewers, this seemed like a not so subtle hint at a relationship between the two, but at the time of the show ending, anything more explicit than that, according to one show writer, would not have been supported by the network. Off screen, however, he has talked about Korrasami in no uncertain terms, saying, "Korrasami is canon. There is no denying that is the official story. Was it a slam dunk victory for queer representation? I think it falls short of that, but hopefully it is a somewhat significant inching forwards." That was less than 10 years ago, and it's not the most recent example of internal censorship. The history of LGBTQ+ representation, especially for children, is wildly recent. These examples are troubling because they are ultimately not representation at all. If it's not explicitly stated in the show in a way that the children that the show is aimed at can understand, it is willfully hiding that representation. The tactic, which falls in line with the prejudiced idea that gay characters are inherently sexual and adult, is that of producers treading the fine conservative line by allowing a writer or actor to announce that their character is gay, but only off air. We saw this in the announcements outside the show itself in the case of Mr. Simmons, a school teacher in Hey Arnold, and Marceline and Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time, up until it was finally confirmed in literally the series finale. If the show itself can be watched without children understanding the subtle hints, then they avoid the risk of boycotting and controversy, but still encourage supportive parents to have their children watch the show. This best of both worlds approach is ultimately only best for the producers, not the children. During its run, Steven Universe included elements of same-sex romance and mediations on gender. However, only a handful of years ago in 2016, the UK aired an episode of the show where same-sex romance had been censored. The dance between Pearl and Rose Quartz instead featured close-ups of completely different characters. In a statement, Cartoon Network UK said, "In the UK, we have to ensure that everything on air is suitable for kids of any age at any time. We do feel like the slightly edited version is more comfortable for local kids and their parents." However, this isn't actually true. The British U age rating, which is the one that Cartoon Network aims for, says this: "Characters may be seen kissing or cuddling, and there may be references to sexual behaviour. This cute romantic scene was clearly seen as too sexual, not because of any actual explicit elements, but because of the social funhouse mirror that was being held against it, twisting it with insidious implications into something it clearly wasn't." The TV landscape now. So what does the TV landscape look for children nowadays? In some ways, we still have a way to go. We still hear the tired refrain of "let kids be kids" and demands to stop trying to force an agenda on them. Words like propaganda, adult, being subjected to, portray an underlying prejudice that is left over from decades past. These ideas about queer people intersect with ideas of the Hays Code, the AIDS crisis, and Section 28 to perpetuate the idea that anything other than straight is perverse. It's adult and explicit and inappropriate and inherently sexual. A man and a woman kissing is perfectly acceptable in even the lowest age-rated films, but a man and a man kissing in the exact same way is seen by many as explicit, and not just by people who are actively and willfully homophobic, but people who think of themselves as liberal and supportive too. Many shows still only give us one-off side characters in episodes, like Arthur, Clifford the Big Red Dog, and most recently Peppa Pig introducing a pair of lesbian mums. We also see clear outrage by some on social media to the possibility of even these small moments, proving that not everyone understands the necessity of authentic representation. But over recent years, we have seen a kind of canon emerging, shows that included queer representation not as a one-off nod or hidden element, but a key part of the show itself. Doctor Who's combination of openly queer characters like Jack Harkness and Bill Potts in bigger roles, combined with frequent inclusions of queer side characters, was a revolutionary turning point in UK kids TV. Children's cartoons in the US, including Steven Universe and the She-Ra reboot, have given us a leap forward in representation also, with heartfelt storylines alongside light-hearted ones that prevent these portrayals from becoming inherently tragic or focused only on prejudice. These shows have huge dedicated audiences, in part due to the inclusion of queerness, including from queer adults watching a kind of wish fulfillment, seeing characters that look like them that they never got to have as children themselves. An even more expansive representation has been seen in the last couple of years. Specific sexuality labels were notably used in Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts, actually saying the word gay as opposed to just alluding to the idea that so-and-so has two dads. We got some lead non-binary rep in the character of Frankie in Monster High, and enjoyed multiple queer characters in Owl House before its recent cancellation. This trend towards giving more representation that digs into the complexities of queer identities is so encouraging. We don't have to underestimate children. We can give them the chance to understand non-binary representation as easily as they understand many aspects of the gender binary itself. There is something deeply ingrained within many people, ironically from their own childhoods, that is perpetuated by the very lack of representation itself. The feeling these things are not for children to see or hear about, that they are too complicated, too confusing, too adult for young minds. But that couldn't be further from the truth. We do a disservice to children if we don't teach them about the diversity of the real world, because representation can, quite literally, save lives. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I would love to know in the comments if you have any recommendations of like good queer children's media, maybe especially those that aren't in the English language, stuff from other countries around the world. Please let us know. I've been Rowan Ellis. As Hannah said at the beginning, I am an author of the book Here and Queer, which is a guide to life for queer girls, which is available in all good bookshops, as they say. I also have a YouTube channel where I do kind of deep dive, long form video content around queer history and pop culture, and also a podcast called the Queer Movie Podcast, where we talk about queer movies. Is pretty much what it says on the tin. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and thank you to Hannah for having me on your channel.